Imagine you are a farmer, 800 BC, no internet, no weather app, no Google, your crops are dying, there's been no rain for weeks, your family is hungry, and you have absolutely no idea why. So what do? You do what any completely reasonable person would do. You decide a giant stole a god's hammer, obviously. Problem solved, mystery closed, back to farming. I know how that sounds, but stay with me because this is actually one of the most important stories in human history, and I promise you, by the end of this video, you will never look at Marvel movie the same again. For most of human history, people had exactly one tool for answering hard questions: mythology. Stories about gods, monsters, cosmic battles, passed down from parents to children for thousands of years. And before you laugh, this was not stupidity. These people had the exact same brains we do, the same curiosity, the same need for answers. They just had no telescopes, no labs, no satellites. They had lightning, drought, earthquakes, death, and absolutely zero explanation for any of it. So they did what humans do best. They made something up, and then they committed to it completely. Take Thor. You know him from Marvel. Big guy, red cape, nice hair. But the real Thor was actually way more interesting and way more useful. The Vikings believed Thor rode across the sky every day in a chariot pulled by two goats. When he swung his hammer, thunder. Thunder meant rain. Rain meant crops. Crops meant food. Food meant survival. So Thor was not just a cool guy with a hammer, he was actually the entire food supply. Worshipping Thor was the ancient version of checking the weather app. Except if you forgot, you did not just get wet, you starve. Here is something that stopped me when I first learned it. Almost every culture in human history with zero contact with each other came up with the exact same idea. Good forces, chaos forces, fragile world stuck in the middle. The Vikings called their world Midgard, the kingdom in the middle, safe, ordered, protected by the gods. Outside it lived the giants, massive, chaotic, and with one single goal: destroy everything. Basically, the original haters. And before you say, okay, that's just ancient stuff, every superhero movie ever made is built on the exact same idea. Good side, bad side, innocent world caught in between. Thor fighting Thanos is the same story as Thor fighting the giants. Same plot, same stakes, just with a bigger budget and better hair. Now here is where it gets really interesting. The giants came up with a plan, a clever one. They stole Thor's hammer, his most powerful weapon, and their ransom demand: give us Freya, the goddess of fertility, or you never see the hammer again. Let me translate that. No hammer, no rain, no crops, no Freya, nothing grows, no children are born. Basically, the giant had just taken the entire world hostage with one move. Checkmate, game over. So what did the gods, the most powerful beings in the universe, decide to do about this? They dressed Thor as a bride. I need you to really picture this. Thor, big, angry, the guy whose hand shake when he's mad, in a wedding dress, with stones stuffed under his top, walking into the giant's castle pretending to be Freya, and Loki, his sidekick, went as his bridesmaid. The two most powerful gods in Norse mythology undercover in dresses. This was their plan A. During the wedding feast, Thor, still in full bridal costume, ate an entire ox, 8 salmon, 3 barrels of beer. The giant king started getting very suspicious about his bride. Loki, completely calm, told him she was just really excited about the wedding and had not eaten in a week. The giant believed it, which honestly says a lot about the giants. When they finally placed the hammer in the bride's lap during the ceremony, Thor grabbed it, burst out laughing, and wiped out every single giant in the room. Thor, in a wedding dress, saving the entire world. Truly one of the greatest moments in mythology. Respect. But here is the part most people never think about. These myths were not just bedtime stories. They were doing something much more important. When drought hit, no rain, crops dying, people starving, the myth gave people an explanation. The giants must have stolen the hammer again, classic giants, and more importantly, it gave people something to do about it. They would act out the myth. Someone from the village would put on a costume, perform the story, go through the whole thing of getting the hammer back, which means at some point in history, a real Viking farmer dressed up as Thor's sprite to make it rain. And you know what? I respect that more than most things I have seen on the internet. But seriously, think about what this gave people. In a moment of complete helplessness, of watching your food disappear and not knowing why, it gave them agency, a role, a ritual, a reason to believe things could get better. For thousands of years, nobody seriously questioned the myths. You were born into them, you believed them, you performed them, you passed them on. That was just life. Then, around 600 BC, in Greece, a small group of people started asking a question nobody had really asked out loud before. Not what is the story about, but is the story actually true? These were the first philosophers, and what they did was radical for their time. They looked at the myths, gods cheating on each other, stealing, throwing tantrums, acting like the worst people you know, but with superpowers, and said, hold on, these stories were made up by humans. They sound like humans, they have human problems, maybe they're not descriptions of reality. Maybe they're just us, but projected onto the sky. A philosopher of that time said it best. Humans created gods in their own image. Greeks made gods that look Greek. Ethiopians made gods that looked Ethiopian. And if horses could draw, their gods would look like horses. That one sentence, written 2500 years ago, still one of the sharpest things ever said about human nature. We do not find truth, we build it, and then we forget we build it. The philosophers were not saying there is no God. They were saying these specific stories, they don't hold up. They were separating the question of truth from the question of tradition, and that distinction changed everything. That's where critical thinking was born. That's where the courage to ask uncomfortable questions came from a few people in Greece who looked at thousands of years of mythology and said, I don't think that's actually how thunder works. Here is where I personally land on all of this, and I will be straight with you. I believe in God, that's not something I'm hiding, but what studying all of this taught me is that believing and thinking are not enemies. The philosopher didn't destroy faith, they destroyed lazy thinking. They said, if something is true, it should be strong enough to survive a question. The myths of Thor were not wrong because people believed in something bigger than themselves. They were wrong because they stopped asking. They confused the story for the truth itself. Real belief in anything should be able to look at hard questions in the eye and not blink. That's what those first philosophers gave us, and I think we still need that more than ever.